We know of Elon Musk's mastery of functions and form through his innovations, in the name of achieving his life goal of colonizing Mars. This might be impossible at first glance, but he has yet again made us see the power of humanity. Elon revealed an even bigger rocket, the Starship 2.0, and this might be the next giant leap in the making that mankind needed to see. The mission. Saturn V, NASA's project under the Apollo program, spent about $49.9 billion in today's currency from 1964 to 1973, where they were able to build 15 rockets that are capable of flight and an additional 3 that were used for ground testing. The distance they worked with was approximately 360,000 kilometers. From December 1968 through December 1972, they were able to send 24 astronauts to the moon. Getting to the moon is no joke, and Elon wants to send more than 1 million people to colonize Mars by 2050. We're working with a 54 million kilometer distance, and that's just in theory. The point where Mars is closest to the sun while the Earth is farthest from it has never happened before, which makes that distance the bare minimum we have to cross. This would be too expensive with the procurement of raw materials alone, so he brought it upon himself to make a cost-efficient way to facilitate planetary travel. There came SpaceX's Starship 1.0, a combination of the upper Starship spacecraft and the lower Super Heavy booster, which has the power to send about 150 tons of cargo into orbit, and possibly beyond. NASA's Saturn V had about 7.6 million pounds of thrust. Starship 1.0 has 17, which makes it the most powerful rocket made in human history in terms of raw power. And as powerful as it may be, only being able to send that amount of load per launch won't be enough. We need to look at the bigger picture, especially when it's as grand as a self-sustaining community on Mars. We won't be hauling people from Earth to Mars. Our rockets must also be big enough to serve as a keystone, an initial housing or base of operations, which will then start the community. Mass-producing rockets that are only capable of transporting 150 tons of cargo will not be cost-effective. That's why the Starship 2.0 is said to be more than twice as large as its predecessor. A New Hope. By its sheer size, the Starship 2.0 will be better at taking people and cargo to Mars. The diameter of this ship will be 18 meters compared to the Starship 1.0, which is 9. With these numbers, its estimated dimensions will have it standing at 775 feet high, which is over twice the height of the Statue of Liberty. It is set to also be the widest rocket ever built, and it won't be taken lightly. It was reported that this rocket can carry about 1,000 tons of payload per launch. We will be working with a rocket that has 8 times the surface area and carries 8 times as much fuel. Assuming that its capacity to hold cargo will be lower as a reusable rocket, the engine would still need to be updated if it were to launch a rocket that's 8 times heavier than its forebearer. Musk had seen it coming. He has been working on the Raptor 2.0, a complete redesign of the Starship 1.0's engine, Raptor 1.0. The original Raptor engine is capable of creating 185 metric tons of force. On the other hand, one Raptor 2.0 engine is capable of creating 230 metric tons of force at sea level, with 250 being achievable, leading to over 500,000 pounds of force in the future. It is also easier to produce. Elon believes that it wouldn't take more than 8 launches to refuel the tanks of the Starship 1.0 before it could resume its travel to Mars. But theoretically, it was said that the larger Starship 2.0 will be able to take all the fuel that it needs to get there. Also, because of its size, it's enough to serve as a keystone to set their colonization plan forward. Survival. Self-sufficiency is non-negotiable. Since the colony will be working in a new, unknown, and harsh environment that denies them from doing manual labor, this brings the need for machines that would be almost impossible to divide and deliver with Starship 1.0's 150-ton carrying capacity. On top of that, Musk also plans on producing fuel back on Mars to help send their starships back to Earth. Theoretically, the starships that landed on Mars won't need a super heavy booster to get to outer space since it has less gravity than Earth. But that won't ease the need for fuel. Elon needs his propellant farm up and running. He could send the pieces of machinery in smaller chunks to make the situation a little less complicated. But it just shows his greater need for bigger and reusable rockets. It was estimated that the cost of sending the Starship 2.0 from the ground to Earth's orbit will take about $8.4 million, with $7.2 million being spent on fuel and $1.2 million for support operations. A single trip with the Starship 2.0 is equal to 8 trips with the Starship 1.0 in terms of payload capacity, which will amount to an estimate of $16 million. Considering the margin of error and further developments that will lower the costs of launching and productions of rockets in the future, it will be safe to assume that Starship 2.0 will have the same costs for carrying the same amount of cargo. It will have an easier time carrying machines and complex mechanical systems for producing food, fuel, and other necessities involved in forming a proper colony, on top of upgrading its carrying capacity from 100 to 1,000. This will eventually be the cheaper but better option. Who would have thought that the space race would be led by a private company owned by a person not driven by greed, but by a childlike desire for humanity to become a spacefaring civilization? It has been almost half a century since humans stepped on the moon. And you're not wrong if you think that it's about time we go back. With SpaceX, it's not just about securing our life in space, it's about knowing that there's a bright future ahead of us. The chance that our next generation will wake up and smile among the stars. Please don't forget to comment and subscribe. Let us know what you think.